When you're working in Autocad Mechanical, there are three standard part representations. They are symbolic, simplified and standard. Now at the moment we're using the standard representation. So these nuts and bolts here and everything are using the standard representation. You can change the default setting for that, i.e. what represents what part. So if I right click and go to options, and then go along here using the arrows and go to AM content, you can see there the default representation for standard content is standard. So for all standard parts and content from the content libraries, you get a standard representation. I always leave that as standard. So I'll OK that and leave that as it is. Now, let's have a look now at some representation of these parts in our drawing. You can change the representation here in the Content tab in the Library panel. I'm going to click on the flyout there and just pin that open so that the Change Representation icon is available. Now, if I change representation here, click on it, come into the drawing, I can change the representation of any of these parts. So if I select my L bracket here and then right-click to confirm, I can change the representation, the 2D representation. If I change that to, say, simplified, and OK it, look what happens. Very, very different to a standard representation. It's just showing a very simplified L bracket, just showing the line like that. If I change that back now and click on the line here and right click and go back to standard, you'll see the difference. Very, very different looking though, aren't they? So be careful when you're changing representation. Be aware of what your client or your customer needs. So if I change the representation, say, of a bolt now, if I click on this one here, and I right click there once I've selected it, and I go for symbolic, watch what happens. Not much left, just a center line showing where it goes through the plate. Now, if I change that back to, let's say, a simplified one, what happens there? Let's change that to simplified. Looks similar, as you can see, but it doesn't actually show any of the hidden detail. If I change that back to standard now and select it here and then right click and go back to the standard, the default, notice the detail on the preview, notice the detail on the bolt as well. So that's what part representations are all about. What they allow you to do is show an object in a particular manner, whether that be symbolic, simplified or standard. Most of the time you will use standard like this for detailed drawing, but there will be occasions, manufacturing drawings and so on, where you only need to use the symbolic settings because the fitter or the manufacturer knows exactly what you're talking about anyway. So that's part representations. They are here on the Library panel on the Content tab on the ribbon. So it's Library, click on the flyout, there's Change Representation there. And also, if you need to change it by default, right click, Options, go to your AM Content tab, and it's down at the bottom here, Default Representation for Standard Content. So, use your part representations for detail work or less detailed work when you're basically showing a conceptual design or perhaps generating a manufacturing drawing.